International Labour Organization has a convention on termination of employment, which requires fairness from the employer of labor and also the democratization of termination of employment. Did the Ikeja Distribution Company follow these procedures before firing some of its staff? I will be speaking with the General Secretary of the National Union of Electricity Employees, Comrade Joe Ajero, who happens to also be the National President of the United Labour Congress. Join me. You're welcome to Labour Lens.
Thank you very much.
All right, sir. I would like to ask you, so much has been asked about the Ikeja Electricity Distribution Company's sack of workers. Would you say that the company followed due process?
Well, the last year, the Ikeja Electricity Distribution Company sacked workers, over 200. And we had series of picketing there. And they went to court. The courts are yet to deliver judgment on the matter. So why a matter is still in court, this year again, they have sacked. And we did them one small letter. We are still proposing to visit them. They now wrote us a letter that we should remember that the matter is in court and that they have copied the courts with a letter that they wrote to us and the one we wrote to them. And you now start to ask yourself, if a matter was in court and they went and took an action, it's like prejudicing the outcome of the court. And then you now wanted to react and they're telling you that the matter is in court and they have copied the court. So what that means is that Ikeja thinks they are above the law. They are not thinking of following due process. You know, in industrial relations, if you want to go embark on any redundancy, you know, you have to write and invite the union and meet with them and discuss the reason, because it's going to affect their members.
How would you rate poor performance? That's the reason the electricity company gave for the sack of workers in this energy sector. What is tenable when it comes to performance of workers?
When people talk about poor performance, they talk of it in relative terms. You know, if you look at performance, there should be indices. You know, even in an examination, there should be measurement and evaluation. And for you to measure, there is a kind of scheme, you know, that if you do this, you score this. If you do this, you score this. It's not something that is exclusive to management. You know, you don't evaluate worker, you know, based on your own terms. Now, if the variables are not such that the worker can control or may control, you can't say you have given somebody a fair hearing. You must look at the validity of any test or any evaluation. Is it valid? You know, the result, is it the target, is it achievable? Now, for a street or for a zone where you don't have electricity for 1 month, and you have a marketer in that area, and you now rate him low, do you expect people there to pay their bills when there is no electricity supply? Now, you are now basing his assessment on the ability of people to go and pay their electricity bill. And the ability of those people, you know, the motivation for them to go and pay, since they didn't receive supply within that period, is not there. For that, you rate the worker low and you sack him and you say productivity. So if you don't bring all the variables, you know, in context, you just use any word, you know, they are performing below expectation.
Last year, workers were sacked at the Ikeja Distribution Electricity Company. This year, also we're experiencing that. Last year, when they actually sacked workers, I remember very vividly that NUI picketed the Ikeja Disco Company and also crippled activities of the electricity company for days. What should we be expecting following this development?
Well, I think what happened was that I did a letter to them and told them that was the first and last letter. And I have not done a second letter. You know, they have sent 1 or 2 representations here since after that time. But they are not willing to reverse what they have done. Besides, they rushed to the DSSs. And we had meetings with the DSS. those ones promised they were going to facilitate a meeting. So we are running out of patience, and we have given those ones all the time to facilitate the meeting and to do what they can do. When and how we are going to react is best known to us, but we definitely will shall.
What has been your experience following the privatization of the electricity sector? Would you say it was necessary for us to have privatized our electricity sector? Has anything changed? And I would like you to share your experience as a union leader following the fact that workers who were actually laid off then actually had a very good severance package.
Well, I wouldn't know those that came with the concept of privatization, especially in the third world countries. Those people did a lot of disservice to humanity. And for those Africans, especially those Nigerians that bought into the concept of privatization, the sins of thousands of people, both workers and consumers, will be on their heads. Their blood will be on their heads. Privatization in Europe and some other advanced economies of the world was a kind of post-industrialization concept. It wasn't pre. Europe, pre-industrialization, wouldn't have said they are going to the market. We are going to hand over to the private sector. Go and check all the roads constructed in Europe. Go and check all the power stations constructed in Europe up to this moment. As I talk with you now, 250,000 megawatts of electricity generated in the United States of America, the headquarters of capitalism in the world, is by the government, the state, the federal, and the municipal councils. There. Now, then they now allow the private sector, and others, to generate their own electricity to complement on their target, because America is targeting 1 million megawatts power. Now, but in Nigeria, they will tell you that government has no business in business. So, what is the duty of government if not for the welfare of the people, of the citizenry? If government has no business in business, so why will government exist if they have no business in business? So, and that concept destroyed everything in Nigeria, all the places. Instead of the private sector to come and participate, they now took over. So what we are now having is transferring of public monopoly to private monopoly. And at the very moment that happened, Nigeria started going down, whether in electricity or other sectors. And some of us want then that any commodity that is not available cannot be affordable. There was no argument that we didn't put across. But when we now later realized that the buyers, the sellers are the buyers by proxy, So what they did, if you watch between 2013 to date, the Nigerian government has given almost $1 trillion, to the same people that bought it. And we were made to understand that maybe those people spent about 400 billion to buy it. But government has paid over 800 or more billion to them. The issue of electricity privatization in Nigeria is a curse. It's not a blessing in disguise. And some people who try to ventilate their frustration were calling for the reversal. And the response we got from the Minister of Power was that for it to be reversed, the entitlement of workers will be returned. And you start to think, do you call these men senior advocates of Nigeria? Somebody who doesn't know that the severance for a work done is for period of work done. So if I have worked in a place for 10 years and you severe me for 10 years, you say I should return for that 10 years. Severance, is it dash? Is it money dash to people? And that was the height of my disappointment on the Minister of Power. So the policy of privatization, I think Nigerians are in a better position to now say, but it's like they are being shut up by the so-called ministers that they should not talk, whether power situation is improving or not, whether they are increasing their tariff. Because even when the issue of tariffs was increased, no consultation, nothing. the increased tariff Nigerians must pay. I think what some of us did was to keep quiet for Nigerians to talk, and I think they are talking.
And that's all we can take on today's episode of Labor Lens. Join us same time next week for a fresh edition of Labor Lens. I am Sharon Ijason, and remember, labor creates wealth.